He was sure his son was about to leave him in a nursing home, until one phone call changed everything. What was the unbelievable secret his son was hiding? Stay with us to uncover the shocking twist that turned everything upside down. A surprise that will leave you speechless. Also, please comment where you're listening from. And if you enjoy stories like these, subscribe for more stories. William sat by the window of his small living room, staring out at the empty street. His fingers lightly brushed the edges of a worn photograph that sat on the table in front of him. The image was of a younger David, his only son, smiling up at him from their family vacation many years ago. It had always been one of his favorites, reminding him of better times when life seemed simpler, when David's laughter filled the air. But now, everything felt different. David had changed. The boy who once ran into his arms after school, eager to share his day, was now distant. The phone calls were fewer, the visits even less frequent. And when David did visit, it was always rushed, full of excuses. Work, meetings, life, whatever it was always something. It didn't take long for the thoughts to creep in. Was he being abandoned? He would never admit it aloud, but in the quiet moments of the night, alone with his thoughts, the fear gripped him. At 78, with his body slowly breaking down, the thought of being left alone in his old age weighed heavily on his heart. When David told him, with a pained expression, that it might be time for him to move into a nursing home, something inside William snapped. Was this it? Was his son truly giving up on him? The boy he raised with so much love and care, the boy who once looked up at him with admiration. Was this how it ended? Alone, in a place with strangers? He couldn't fathom it. But David had insisted, promising to visit. "It'll be better for you, Dad," David had said, his voice trembling. "I can't always be there, but I want what's best for you." Was that true? Or had he simply grown too busy with his own life to care? The days leading up to the move were torture. Each time David visited, William felt a pit in his stomach. His son had always been his world. He had been his pride, his joy. And now, it felt like that world was slipping away, piece by piece. But William couldn't bring himself to argue. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want to seem needy or demanding. His pride, though, was bruised. He had always been independent, strong, a man who took care of himself and others. But now, in his old age, he was faced with the crushing reality that perhaps he had overstayed his welcome in his own son's life. That night, as he lay in bed, the ceiling spinning above him, the tears came. He didn't want to cry, but he couldn't help it. The feeling of abandonment was too strong. It crushed him. And as sleep finally claimed him, he drifted into a restless slumber, praying that tomorrow would bring clarity, some sign that this wasn't really happening, that his son would come to his senses. But when David called the next morning, it wasn't the reassurance William was hoping for. The words David spoke only deepened the confusion. "Dad, I have to go away for a few weeks. It's really important." The line clicked before William could ask why. And just like that, it felt like David was slipping further away from him. The days that followed David's phone call were a blur of silence. William found himself counting the hours, the minutes, waiting for some sign, some explanation. The house that once felt like a home now felt empty. The walls, once filled with the sound of laughter and conversation, now echoed with an eerie quiet. David hadn't been to visit in over a week, and the usual flurry of messages had stopped altogether. William had tried calling his son several times, but each call went unanswered. The little hope that had kept him going started to wither. He spent his days wandering through the house, running his fingers over old books, photos, and keepsakes that once told the story of a family that had been whole. But now it all seemed to be slipping away. "Where did I go wrong?" William whispered to himself one afternoon, the weight of the question pulling at his chest. Was his son truly abandoning him? Had he become a burden? The thoughts churned in his mind like a storm, and no matter how hard he tried to push them away, they wouldn't leave. It wasn't until the following weekend that William heard from David again. This time, the message came in the form of a text. "Dad, I need to talk. Can we meet?" His heart raced as he read the words. He wanted to believe that this was the beginning of an explanation, but a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next afternoon, David arrived, but there was no excitement in his eyes, no warmth in his voice. It was the same distant look that had plagued their recent conversations. William tried to greet him with a smile, but his face betrayed him. He was exhausted, worn thin from the anxiety of the past weeks. "David, where have you been? What's going on? Why haven't you been answering my calls?" William asked, his voice shaky with a mix of hurt and confusion. David hesitated for a moment before responding. "Dad, I've been really busy with work, and I didn't want to worry you with everything I've been dealing with." William looked at his son, his heart sinking. The excuses felt hollow now. "Busy? You couldn't spare 5 minutes for a call? For your own father?" The words escaped before he could stop them. David flinched, his face tightening. "It's not that, Dad. It's just, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." William's pulse quickened. Was this it? The moment where the truth would come out? He braced himself for whatever was coming next, but nothing could prepare him for the revelation that David was about to drop. "I've been working on something for you. Something special," David continued. "I didn't want to say anything until it was ready, but now it's almost finished. I'm sorry I kept it from you." William blinked, trying to process his son's words. "What do you mean? What is it?" David took a deep breath, a moment of hesitation before he spoke again. "I've been working on a documentary about our family, about you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment William couldn't speak. "A documentary?" he asked, still processing. "But why? Why didn't you tell me?" David's eyes softened. "I wanted it to be a surprise. I've been gathering stories, old photos, talking to people who knew you. It's to preserve everything, Dad. Your life, your legacy. I didn't want to rush it, but I was afraid that if I didn't finish it soon, I wouldn't be able to. You've always told me how important family is, and I wanted to show you how much I value it." William sat back in his chair, stunned. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. The tension that had built up over the last few weeks seemed to melt away in the face of this unexpected confession. "But why? Why did you have to keep it a secret?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David's face flushed. "I didn't want you to feel like I was ignoring you. I wanted you to see how much I love you. But I was afraid that if I told you, you'd think I was too busy for you. I didn't want you to feel abandoned. That was never my intention." Tears welled up in William's eyes as he stared at his son. For weeks, he had felt neglected, forgotten, as though his presence had no value. He had imagined his son moving on with his life, forgetting the bond they shared. But now, in the quiet of this moment, everything changed. David reached out and took his father's hand. "I'm sorry, Dad. I never meant for you to feel this way. Please understand. I love you. And this documentary, it's my way of showing you just how much you mean to me. I'm doing this for you." William's heart swelled with emotion. All the pain, all the doubts, melted away in that single, raw moment. He had misunderstood everything. His son hadn't been abandoning him. He had been working tirelessly to give him something truly meaningful, something that would keep their family's memories alive long after they were gone. As William looked into David's eyes, he finally saw the truth that his son loved him more than anything. And in that moment, a weight lifted from his chest, leaving him with a profound sense of peace. As David continues to explain, William's emotions shift from anger to forgiveness, but there's still a lingering question. Why had David been so secretive about this project? Was there something more behind his behavior? What would William discover when the documentary was finally revealed? Would it truly be the beautiful gift David had promised? Or would the truth bring even more surprises than William could imagine? The following weekend, William sat eagerly in his living room, the anticipation palpable. David had promised him that the documentary was almost ready, but William couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was still something more to discover. David arrived early that morning, his face lit up with excitement, a stark contrast to the weary look he had worn when they had last spoken. He walked into the house, carrying a small laptop case with a sense of purpose. "I think you're going to love this, Dad," David said, placing the case gently on the table. "Everything's ready now." William nodded, his heart racing. The truth was, he had never imagined that a simple documentary would have such a profound impact on him. But he wasn't prepared for what was to come. David opened the laptop, and with a few quick keystrokes the screen flickered to life. The room dimmed as the opening credits of the documentary appeared. William's name flashed on the screen in bold letters: "The Life and Legacy of William Smith, A Family's Journey." William's breath caught in his throat as memories, familiar faces, old family pictures, flashed before his eyes. His heart swelled with emotion as David's voice filled the room. "Dad, this is for you. I wanted to give you a glimpse of what I've been working on. I wanted to show you the impact you've had on all of us." The film began with a montage of old family photos, moments from William's childhood, his marriage, the births of his children, and the special occasions that had defined his life. It was a beautiful tribute, a visual symphony of his past. But then, something unexpected happened. The screen shifted to a much more recent video. It was a clip of William from just a few months ago. He was sitting in his favorite armchair talking to his daughter, Jane, about his dreams for the future. "What I really want," he had said in the video, "is to make sure my kids understand how much I love them, how much they mean to me. I just want them to know I'm here for them, no matter what." William's eyes widened. The words he had spoken felt so raw, so vulnerable. He hadn't realized that David had captured that moment. Had it been a sign of his own fears of abandonment? He was now seeing himself through the lens of his children, and the emotions were overwhelming. As the documentary continued, more people came into view. His old friends, colleagues, neighbors. They shared heartfelt stories of how William had shaped their lives. They spoke about his kindness, his sense of humor, and how he always went out of his way to help others. But there was more. As the documentary progressed, William's face slowly shifted from joy to confusion. There was a section that he had never seen before, a segment he was not prepared for. It was a series of interviews with strangers, people William had never met in his life, speaking about how his actions had affected their lives. People from all walks of life, from volunteers at local shelters to people he had helped in small, almost unnoticed ways over the years. The footage was raw, candid, and deeply moving. William turned to David, his voice trembling. "Who are these people? How did you find them?" David smiled softly, his eyes glistening with emotion. "These are the people you touched without even realizing it. They're the ones who benefited from your kindness in ways you'll never know. I wanted you to see how far-reaching your impact has been." William's heart swelled. These were the people he had helped in quiet, unspoken ways. People who had passed through his life without ever saying a word, but whose lives had been changed forever. But just when William thought he had seen it all, the documentary took a sharp turn. The screen shifted again, this time to a scene from years ago, a day William could barely remember. It was a moment of intense emotion, a fight between him and his late wife, Sarah. The argument had been about money, about family decisions, and about dreams unfulfilled. "I don't understand, William," Sarah's voice echoed through the room. "You're always so focused on everyone else, your friends, your colleagues, the strangers you help. But what about us? What about our family? Do you even see me anymore?" The footage was raw, almost painful to watch. The argument had been one of the most difficult moments in their marriage, but David had included it, capturing the complexity of their relationship, the love, the frustration, and the unspoken pain. David's voice filled the room again. "I know you've always carried the weight of that argument, Dad, but I wanted to show you that it wasn't just about the fight. It was about love. You've always been there for everyone, but sometimes you needed to be there for the people who mattered most. For Mom. For me." William felt a lump rise in his throat. The weight of the revelation was heavy. He had always believed that Sarah's death had been a result of their unresolved issues, but now, seeing this footage, he realized how much she had loved him, despite everything. She had understood him in a way he hadn't fully recognized at the time. As the documentary continued, more personal memories surfaced, some painful, some uplifting. It became clear that David had not just been working on a simple tribute. He had been digging into the complex layers of their family's history, uncovering truths that William had long buried in the depths of his heart. David's voice returned, now more somber, more reflective. "I know, Dad, that sometimes you feel like you've failed, that you're not enough, but what I hope this documentary shows you is that you are more than enough. You are the glue that holds us together, and sometimes you don't even realize how much you've shaped the lives of those around you." William sat in stunned silence, the truth of David's words sinking in. The feeling of abandonment that had gripped him for weeks now seemed trivial. His son had spent all this time, not neglecting him, but working to uncover and share the deepest parts of their family's journey, a journey that, despite the hardships, had always been rooted in love. As the final credits rolled, a final message appeared on the screen, a message from David. "This is for you, Dad. The last part of the documentary will be for us, for our future. I've kept one last thing a secret, something that will change everything. I can't wait to show you." William's eyes widened. What could this last secret be? How could anything be more impactful than what he had just seen? The film ended with a black screen, but the questions lingered. What was this final secret? How would it change everything? The week after the documentary, William couldn't shake the feeling that there was something David hadn't fully revealed. He had spent countless hours rewatching the film, reflecting on every moment, every word. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that something was missing. David's final message, the promise of one last secret, gnawed at him relentlessly. David had called a family gathering for the following Sunday. Everyone, William's children, grandchildren, even some of his oldest friends, were invited to their house for a special dinner. The air was thick with anticipation. William couldn't help but wonder, was this the moment that would finally bring everything into focus? Would he finally understand what David had been hiding all this time? The night of the dinner arrived, and the house was filled with the sound of laughter, the clinking of silverware, and the aroma of freshly cooked food. William tried to enjoy the celebration, but his mind kept drifting back to the documentary. As the meal came to a close, David stood up, his face unusually serious. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," David began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've asked you all to come because I need to share something very personal with Dad, and with all of you." William's heart raced. David's words, though measured, carried an unmistakable weight. He could feel the room shift. Everyone's eyes turned toward him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. David continued, "Dad, when I started working on the documentary, I wanted to show you how much you meant to me, to the family, and to the world. But as I dug deeper, I uncovered something I wasn't prepared for, something that will explain so much of what you've been going through." William's pulse quickened. He tried to steady himself, but a sense of dread washed over him. What was this secret? What could David possibly know that would change everything? David's voice cracked slightly as he struggled to contain the emotion building up inside him. "Dad, there's something you've been carrying all these years, It's not just the weight of your past mistakes or the fear of abandonment. It's something else, something I've known for a while but wasn't ready to tell you. I think it's time you understood." He paused, taking a deep breath. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone waited for the revelation that would change everything. David turned to the table where a small box lay in front of William. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed like the center of the universe. He reached for the box, slowly opening it to reveal an old, worn-out envelope. "Dad," David said softly, "this is the letter Mom wrote to you before she passed away." William's heart sank. Sarah's handwriting had been such a familiar sight in their home, but this letter, he had never seen it before. She had never mentioned it. He stared at the envelope, hesitant to touch it. David continued, "You've always blamed yourself for her death, but I want you to know that she never blamed you. She was proud of you, proud of the man you became. She wrote this letter in the last months of her life, but she never gave it to you. She asked me to hold on to it, for when the time was right." With trembling hands, William slowly opened the envelope. The paper inside was delicate, the ink slightly faded with age, but the words were clear. "My dearest William, I know that we've had our struggles. Our relationship has not always been perfect, and I've often felt that we were worlds apart in our understanding of each other. But I need you to know something that I've never said out loud. I need you to understand that I see you. I see all the sacrifices you've made, all the love you've given, and all the ways you've tried to be there for me, for the kids, for everyone. I know you think you failed me at times, but you haven't. You've never failed me. I love you, William, and I want you to know that before I go. Please forgive yourself for the things you think you've done wrong. I never blamed you. I just want you to be happy. With all my love, Sarah." As William read the letter aloud, the room was silent, save for the sound of his shaky voice. Tears welled up in his eyes as he finished reading the final words. The weight that had been on his heart for so many years, the guilt he had carried since Sarah's death, began to dissolve. He looked up, his voice barely a whisper. I never knew she felt that way. I thought I had let her down." David placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't, Dad. She never blamed you. She loved you more than you'll ever know." The tears fell freely now, not from sorrow but from a sense of relief, of years of pent-up emotion being released. For the first time in a long time, William felt peace. He understood now that his fear of abandonment, of failure, was born from a place of misunderstanding, of a deep sense of guilt that had never been his to carry. But just as William began to feel the burden lifting, David added one last thing that stunned everyone in the room. "Dad, there's one more part of the secret," David said, his voice quiet but filled with anticipation. "This letter wasn't just for you. It was for me, too. Mom knew I'd be the one to find it, and she wanted me to share it with you, when I thought you were ready. But there's something else she wanted you to know, something that will change everything once more." The air seemed to freeze. William could feel his heart racing again. What could possibly be left to uncover? David leaned in, his face serious. "She wanted you to know that, no matter what, you were never alone. Not then, not now, and not in the future." William's mind spun. What did this mean? What more could Sarah have meant? William's thoughts swirled in a dizzying rush. David's words echoed in his mind, but they didn't make sense. How could there be more? He had already been through so much emotional upheaval. What could Sarah have meant by, "You were never alone, not then, not now, and not in the future"? The room was still, every eye fixed on David as if waiting for him to reveal the missing piece that would make sense of it all. David took a deep breath, clearly gathering his thoughts. Then, with a quiet intensity, he spoke. Mom had one last thing she needed to say. She wrote a second letter, one that was never meant for anyone else but you, Dad. She wrote it because she knew you needed to hear it. The second letter is what ties everything together. William felt his heart stop. A second letter? Could it really be true? He had thought he had seen everything, read everything. But if Sarah had hidden another message for him, another key to unlocking the peace he desperately needed, then perhaps this was the final step. David reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a yellowed, folded letter with his father's name written on the front in Sarah's neat handwriting. William's hands trembled as he reached for it. Sarah's second letter. William, my love, there are things I've never shared with you, things I kept to myself because I didn't want to burden you. But you need to know this now, something that will change the way you see everything. The truth is, I always knew about your fears. Your fear of being alone, your fear of abandonment. I knew because I had the same fear for you. You thought I would leave you, and I thought the same. But we were both wrong. We had each other until the very end, and that's all that mattered. I know you've carried so much guilt, about me, about your choices, but none of it was ever as heavy as you made it out to be. Our love, our family, and the moments we shared were never tainted by mistakes. They were a testament to our bond, to the truth that we were stronger together, and that even in my final days, I found peace knowing you would be okay. I wanted to make sure you knew. You weren't just a husband or a father, you were my partner, and I never wanted you to feel alone. Now, I'm asking you, for the sake of our children and grandchildren, to release yourself from this burden. You've carried it long enough. Let it go, and live the life you've always deserved. I love you always, Sarah. Tears flowed freely down William's face as he finished reading the second letter aloud. It was as though a dam had broken inside him, releasing years of sorrow, guilt, and regret. In Sarah's words, he found not just forgiveness, but also understanding. She had known him better than anyone, and she had understood the fears that had haunted him. David reached over and gently pulled the letter from William's hands, folding it carefully and placing it back into the envelope. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so proud of you. You've always been a rock for this family. Now it's time for you to let go of the past and embrace the future." William nodded, his chest heavy with a mix of grief and relief. "I didn't realize. I didn't know how much I'd been holding on to. But now, I think I'm finally ready to let go." For the first time in many years, William truly felt free. Free from the guilt. Free from the fear of abandonment. Free from the misconceptions he had carried all his life. The truth Sarah had shared, through the letters and through David's words, had finally unlocked the peace he had been searching for. As the evening drew to a close and the family gathered together in the warmth of the living room, William felt a profound sense of gratitude. His journey had been long, filled with heartache and confusion, but now, with the weight of the past finally lifted from his shoulders, he was able to look forward with hope and clarity. David had not only shared his mother's letters but had also revealed the truth behind William's long-standing fears and doubts. What had once seemed like abandonment was now understood to be a part of the natural ebb and flow of life. There was no more room for guilt, no more space for self-blame. The family, united and stronger than ever, understood the depth of what had transpired. They saw not just a father and grandfather, but a man who had finally found peace. His transformation was nothing short of extraordinary, and it had all come from the love and understanding of his family. As you reflect on William's story, consider the weight of the emotions that can shape our lives: fear, guilt, and regret. But remember, there is always hope, and there is always a way to heal. If you've ever struggled with feelings of abandonment or guilt, know that it's never too late to release those burdens and embrace the future with open arms. If this story touched you, share it with someone you care about. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, or even someone who might be going through something similar. You never know how much a story like this can help. And if you found inspiration in William's journey, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories like this one. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. What do you think of William's transformation? Have you ever struggled with something similar? Remember, you're never truly alone, and the best is always yet to come. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, subscribe for more heartfelt stories and life-changing lessons.